All right, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. This video is from the Tucker Carlson Network, which is entitled, Who Really is Israel According to the Bible? Tucker weighs in. All right, so in this short video clip that we're going to watch here, this guy, Tucker Carlson, is clearly playing games, right? Like he really doesn't know the answer to this question, right? Like he doesn't know what's really going on. You see? So again, the conclusion of the matter is that the whole world knows that these people who occupy the Holy Land are not the chosen. All right?
The question of Israel, and I don't mean to dodge your question, I'll just do it really quickly. There's a whole theological debate about dispensationalism or replacement.
Yeah, I'm not a
theology.
dispensational.
I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I never heard the terms.
Yeah.
Right. So since he never heard the terms, which I don't believe that, let's get it. All right. Like I said, this guy is playing games, but let's pull this up. So this is from a small hat website, the jij.org, about replacement theology, right? And what that is. All right, let's go straight to the point, as I brought this out before. Here in the third paragraph, it says, this assumption is based on a particular method of interpreting the Bible, a doctrine called supersessionism, an older name for replacement theology. The idea is that the Most High is finished with the Jews, and that in his unfolding linear program of history, the New Testament Christian church has replaced the Jews as his chosen people of promise, right? And where is that in the scriptures? All right? That the New Testament Christian church has replaced the Jews as his chosen people of promise. The church is now the, quote, new or true Israel, all right? Madness, right? And this is what you Christian nationalists believe. All right, you plantation Christians believe that everybody is included now, that God loves everybody. This is where that doctrine comes from. All right, the church is now the new, quote, or true Israel, and the Jews no longer have a special status or divine role. Where is that in the scriptures, man? The idea, right? Because supersessionism, replacement theology is a Christian idea, right? That idea comes from the belief that the Jews forfeited their role as the people of God when they rejected Yahweh Shai as Messiah, supposedly voiding their biblical covenant with the Most High, right? It says replacement theology has been around for a long time. We can trace it as far as back as the 2nd century, when Justin Martyr put forward the idea that the Christian church is the, quote, true spiritual Israel, right? So that's what that is, which is not doctrinal, right? This is Psalm 147:19. It says, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. Verse 20 to point. It says, he have not dealt so with any nation, all right? He have not dealt so with any nation, and as far as his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shah. So the Lord is not dealing with the other nations, right? Joel 2:27. And then we'll go back to the video, get a couple more. All right, Joel 2:27, it says, and ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, that I am the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, your power and none else. All right? He's not the God of the other nations. I am the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, your power and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. Right? Malachi 3:6. Malachi 3:6, it says, for I am the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. All right, the Lord is still dealing with his people, and that never changed. Right? So all of that cuts the replacement theology madness. All right, so let's go back.
It's not the world I grew up in. I think it's sort of interesting, but I don't fully understand it, and I would never weigh in on it. I would only say, if you think that murdering tens of thousands of children, which the Israeli government has done, is consistent with Christianity, we're reading a different manuscript. I just don't see that at all. I understand Christianity to be, a very, very different faith. And it's hard to imagine Jesus being in favor of this.
Yeah.
And I guess we could have a debate about it, but what gets me going is watching Christian preachers who are paid by the government of Israel take free vacations to Israel, where they stock up on talking points and propaganda and then inflict all of that propaganda on their congregations and then use the Bible to justify it. You're justifying violence against innocents.
Yeah.
I recognize October 7th is bad. I'm hardly shilling for the Islamists. I mean, it's also stupid. I just don't think that what the Israeli government has done in Gaza, which is a crime, it's a historic crime. It is genocide. It's an effort to move an entire people out and kill a lot of them and then take their land. I thought we were against that. It happens all the time around the world. Israel's not the only country that does it, but they are doing it. We're paying for it. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all these Christian pastors, these evangelical pastors come in and are like, if you criticize that, you're not a Christian and you hate Jesus and hate Jews. It's like, there's a debate over what the term the Great Deception refers to, but it could be that, because that's so crazy to me. And maybe I'm the crazy one. I preface this by saying I try to maintain humility at all times. Like, what do I know? I'm an Episcopalian. Like, I don't know anything. But I have pressed a lot of these people, like including Ted Cruz, who's a politician. Like, he's not a theologian, I get it, but he couldn't even name the book of the Bible, not even the book that supported his entire Christian theology. So I think it's fair for me to say, and by the way, my version of the Bible, which is the NLT, which I like.
Great translation.
Yeah, I really like the NLT very much. It's just clear English, right?
Yeah, we do too. It has some gems in there,
Doesn't have that phrase in it. Sorry. But whatever. It's not, I guess what I'm saying is this isn't about theology. I think there are a lot of really decent, thoughtful, Bible-believing Christians, Jesus followers, who have been convinced of this. And maybe they're right. I don't think they are. Maybe they are. I don't think I'm necessarily always right, that's for sure. But I know for a fact that a lot of their preachers have become political actors who are working on behalf of a foreign government that's very hostile to Christianity. Do they ever try to convert Israelis in Tel Aviv? All these preachers go over there for the weekend. Jesus is the answer. They're telling their congregations. Do they try to street preach in Tel Aviv? No. Not.
Yeah, exactly. All right, because these are those sellouts, all right, that they're using to forward the propaganda. All right, to keep the lie alive. All right, I went into that about a month ago. In this lesson here, the clash before the fall, MAGA divided over tiny top first politics, right? This is what he's talking about. All these pastors that they bought and paid, to forward the propaganda of the tiny top.
A partnership between Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Friends of Zion Museum led to the unprecedented visit.
It's the first time in history the State of Israel has officially partnered with 1,000 strategic pastors to commission them as ambassadors to combat anti-Semitism and reach the youth of their generation.
Dr. Mike Evans says Israel's fight is not just on the battlefield.
Right now there's an ideological war that Israel's losing. So they need the evangelicals, they need the Zionists to fight an ideological war.
One of the goals of this gathering is to strengthen Christian support during a time of growing global anti-Semitism.
Yeah. There was a video that I posted a while back. It was from RT. Hillary Clinton, she said that we're losing the information war, all right, because of the truth. And that's what's going on, all right? The tiny top, is losing steam. The lie is no longer working. All right. The witchcraft is wearing off. All right. They're constantly being talked about. Their origins, who they are. All right. So like I said, the world knows that they're not the chosen seed. All right. And there's no way that they can back it up through scripture. So they're going to use these sellout pastors to try to get the people to conform and to stay, to keep the propaganda alive, to keep it going. These are those sellouts, right?
They say the pulpit must speak louder than the propaganda.
So it's just, I think, an extraordinary time for pastors to go to their pulpits and to speak with clarity and with boldness and to push back on the anti-Semitism, the bigotry that is being pushed toward Jewish people and toward the people of Israel.
Unfortunately, the pulpit has become quiet about those things. We've allowed cultural voices to speak louder to the congregation than the pastors have on these topics. So it's been motivating to make sure that we go back and bring the message of who Israel is to the Lord, and our role as Christians to continue to support and pray for Israel.
There's a growing cancer within the evangelical movement in America where people are thinking Israel doesn't matter and there's nothing biblical about our relationship to Israel. This is very dangerous.
Ambassador Huckabee, a former pastor, sees a rising danger in the church.
Because this idea that God will break his covenant, or he has broken his covenant with the Jewish people, it borders on blasphemy. Because if God will break his covenant with the Jewish people, what on earth makes me think as a Christian that he will keep his covenant with me?
Wednesday, the pastors went to the Nova Music Festival site where Hamas terrorists slaughtered 378 and kidnapped 44.
That was emotional. That was devastating. I have 4 teenage children in Austin. We go to music festivals. That's what you do in Austin. And to think about the kind of terror that those young people experienced, it's just unfathomable. I think that pastors and church leaders all need to come and understand and see the truth about the matter, the true story, and what actually happened here.
This gathering is a prelude to a massive campaign planned for next year.
We're launching in 2026 a global program to reach 1 million pastors and 1 million churches globally to teach them a biblical worldview so they realize God's not canceling any promises to the Jewish people, and he's not canceling to the Christians either.
There you go. So nothing but madness, man. All right. And they're using these sellouts to forward the propaganda real quick. Just thinking about that. All right. The Lord gonna judge these sellouts, these evildoers, man. All right. Isaiah 31. All right. Let me get that real quick. Yeah, Isaiah 31:2, it says, "Yet he also is wise and will bring evil, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of evildoers and against the help of them that work iniquity," man. And that's these sellout pastors, man. The Lord gonna judge these people, man. Okay? They've been set up to keep the lie going. But it's not gonna work no matter what they do. This because we're in that time of truth being declared, man. As I said. 2 Ezra 6:27. "For evil shall be put out and deceit shall be quenched." This is why these devils are scrambling. All right, we live in the era or the time, all right, where evil is being put out, lies, deceit is being quenched. All right, verse 28, "As for faith, it shall flourish, corruption shall be overcome, and the truth which have been so long without fruit shall be declared." That's what's going on. All right, so they're doing everything, getting pastors, buying people off to forward the propaganda, the bullshit. All right, because it's not working. All right, and like I said, this is the time where they're getting ready to just shut it all down. All right, because too many people are speaking about them, calling them out. All right, so let's go back.
One of them, they don't. What is that? Do you really believe? So I see them as either willing or unwilling dupes of a foreign government. Whatever their motive, whatever they know or don't know, they are doing something that's inexcusable, and it's very hard to understand what they're doing.
I kind of have the same train of thought as you. I remember when the October 7th thing went down. I can admit here, humbling, like, yeah, I was like the average evangelical pastor.
Yeah,
That's
I
like,
get it.
which it tends to be a trend. And I think there are a lot of people that do the same thing. They're like, yeah, this, God's chosen people, this is and that. And that's how it was. But then it was like, I had to do my own digging. When I would have to look at news sources coming from Jerusalem, coming from Israel and all these things to kind of go, oh, shoot, wait, there's a lot more happening over there that I didn't know. There's a lot more going down that I wasn't told when I turned on the news. And so that's kind of where, I loved when you were talking to Ted Cruz and you were like, who is Israel, right? Because when the average evangelical is like Israel, they're like, oh, yes, the ethnic group, the ethnically Jewish people.
Yeah, you see? So these people, like I said, they know, man. These Edomites know. Even on the comment board, real quick, I was looking, they're saying a lot of things, but nobody's addressing who the true Israelites are. They know that the tiny tops are not the true Israelites, but who are they? So they'll never touch on that. All right? That's why you Edomites are the devil, man. Right? It pains them to admit the truth, and they know what it is. All right, they're seeing the prophets on the highways and hedges. They're watching these videos, man. All right, but they just won't come out and say it. That's why I said this guy Tucker Carlson is playing games. All right.
Israel is, and that's who it is. And I would be kind of where you are, where I'm like, I personally think Israel is believers in Jesus Christ. And I you read Romans, the book of Romans, where it talks about, being grafted into the tree, and that people who are grafted in have been given the right to become children of Abraham. And it's like, who are children of Abraham?
They are all Israelites. Okay, see, this is where you so-called Christians err, not knowing the scriptures, man. All right, that tree, those Gentiles that were grafted back in are Israelites, man. All right, you got to be of that same tree, that same line. All right, that same species, man. All right, and I'll get that in Romans 11. But first, I want to get this in the chat GPT. I had put in, when did replacement theology become part of Bible doctrine? Short answer. Replacement theology, supersessionism, was not a doctrine of the apostles or early Hebrew believers. You see? Was not a doctrine of the apostles or early Hebrew believers. All right? It developed gradually after the first century, especially as the church became majority Gentile and became mainstream by the 4th and 5th centuries. All right? Number one here. It says, New Testament era, 1st century, no replacement theology. All right? The earliest believers were all Israelites / Jews, and the movement was understood as the restoration of Israel. Acts 1:6, Acts 3:19, 21 to 21, Romans 11. Gentiles entering the faith were viewed as wild branches grafted in to Israel's tree, Romans 11. Not a new entity replacing Israel, all right? No apostle taught that the church replaces Israel, man. All right? You Christians don't know what you're talking about. All right? Number two, it says late 1st and 2nd century, beginning of the shift. Once Jerusalem was destroyed 70 AD and Judea's influence weakened, Gentile leadership increased. All right, heathens. Some early theologians began interpreting Israel's judgment as proof that God transferred favor to the church. Right? Early Caesar period Ignatius encouraged separation from, quote, Jewish customs, not claiming replacement yet, but setting the stage. And then we read about this guy in the other article, Justin Martyr, 150 AD, the first clear statement of something like replacement. He says Christians are now the, quote, true Israel spiritually. This is the earliest documented form of replacement theology. See that? All right, it's all exposed, man. That ain't the truth. Right? Let's get that in Romans real quick. So before we get Romans 11, let's get this real quick. This is Acts chapter 13, verse 26. It says, men and brethren, children of the stock of Abraham, And whosoever among you feareth the Most High, to you is the word of this salvation sent, right? It said the stock of Abraham, right? Let's get that.
Strong's G, 1085. Genos. Genos.
Right? And it says kindred, offspring, family, stock, tribe, nation, right? It says, i.e., nationality or descent from a particular people. Okay? Not everybody, but a particular people. And who is that? Through the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? The stock of Abraham. It says the aggregate of many individuals of the same nature, kind, or sort. Like I was saying earlier, you got to be of the same stock, the same species, the same offspring to be grafted back in. Right? Let's get that in Romans 11 real quick. So this is Romans chapter 11 and verse, let's just start at verse 13 and go down so we can get to the point. All right, by being grafted back into the tree. As we read earlier, right? It said, right? It says, Gentiles entering the faith were viewed as wild branches grafted into Israel's tree. Okay, Romans 11. Not a new entity replacing Israel. No apostle taught that the church replaces Israel. All right, boom. Okay, so Romans 11, let's go there. Romans 11 in verse 13. And it reads, it says, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify my office. All right, so Apostle Paul's office was committed to the Gentiles, the Israelite foreigners. All right, you can read about that in Galatians, the first chapter. All right, he was set up to go teach the heathen. All right, these Israelite foreigners that were moving like Gentiles, man. Okay, verse 14, Romans 11 and 14, it says, it says, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are of my flesh, and might save some of them. You see, so you had an elect amongst the Jews and the Gentiles. Okay, and this verse right here in verse 14 proves that Apostle Paul's audience were Israelites. All right, he said, them which are of my flesh. This is Romans 11 and 1. I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. You see that? So Apostle Paul is acknowledging that he is an Israelite, all right, the seed of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. All right, his kinsman according to the flesh, right? Let's get that one in Romans 9. Romans 9 and verse 3 says, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Yahushua, my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh. Okay? Verse 4, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of the Most High and the promises. Verse 5, whose are the fathers, and of whom as concerning the flesh Yahushua came, who was over all, the Most High blessed forever. Amen. So who did Yahushua come for? Right? Let's get that in Matthew 10. Right? This is the book of Matthew 10 and verse 5. It says, these 12 Yahushua sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not. Verse 6. But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. See? This is who Yahushua came for. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. You see? Let's go back to Romans. All right. So Romans 11 and verse 15, it says, for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? All right. Because when you read, up in the chapter here, All right, it goes into pretty much when those Jews were provoked to jealousy. All right, those that fell due to the disbelief on Yahweh Shai. All right, that opened up the fold for the rest of Israel to come in. All right, let me read it again. Romans 11:15. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, all right, that world goes back to cosmos. All right, which I have brought it out in the Greek Septuagint. That word cosmo really goes back to Jewish territory or people. That's the world, the Israelites. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? All right, so they're going into these Gentiles that came out of that dead state. All right, verse 16, for if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. It says, if the root be holy, so are the branches. And who are the branches? Israel. All right, let's get that in Jeremiah real quick. Jeremiah 11:16. The Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushai called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult, he have kindled a fire upon it. All right, going back to the curses and being scattered. All right, captivity. Okay, it says, with the noise of a great tumult, he have kindled a fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. All right, we were broken, we were scattered. All right, scattered amongst the nations. Verse 17, for the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua of hosts that planted thee have pronounced evil against thee. All right, again, the curses. For the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they have done against themselves to provoke me to anger and offering incense unto Baal. See that? So again, the branches are the Israelites, man. All right, going back to Romans 11. All right, Romans 11. Oh, let me get one more. All right, let me get that one in John the 15th chapter too. All right, John, right? Yahweh is the vine, followers are the branches. See? Israelites, John 15:1. And it reads, it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Verse 3, now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you, all right, which is the true baptism, being washed through the word. Verse 4, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. No more can ye except ye abide in me. I am the vine, and ye are the branches. See? I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me, ye can do nothing. You see that? So again, the branches represent Israel and Yahweh Shai being the vine. Right? You know, the wild branches grafted into Israel's tree. That's plain. Let's go back to Romans 11 and finish it out. All right, so back in Romans 11 and 17, okay, it says, if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree, right, going into those Israelite foreigners, those Gentiles, okay, those Hellenized Jews that were moving and operating like heathen, all right, those were the wild olive trees that were broken off, all right, those Israelites that were scattered amongst the heathen nations. And thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partakers of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Verse 18, boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Verse 19, thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Verse 20, well, because of unbelief they were broken off, okay? And thou standest by faith, be not high-minded, but fear. For verse 21, for if Yahweh Shem Yahushua spare not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Okay? Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of the Most High on them which fell, severity, but toward the goodness, if thou continue in his goodness, otherwise thou shalt also thou also shalt be cut off. Verse 23, and it says, and they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in. God is able to graft them in again. So the point, this is what I'm making. The only way for you to be grafted back in again, you got to be of that same vine, that same stock. Okay, that same species, man. All right? You can only graft something of the same kind back in. You have to be of the same, all right? You got to be of the same origin is what I'm saying. Okay? It says, verse 24, for if thou were cut out of the olive tree, which we know what the olive tree is, Israel, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, all right? Because those wild branches that were broken off, they weren't cultivated, man. They had that heathen mindset, all right? It says, if thou were cut off, or thou were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? All right, because those Gentiles are still Israelites, man, is the point. Okay, as we see here in the chat. All right, no apostle taught that the church replaces Israel, man. All right, so those are the ones that were being grafted in. These were Israelites, man. Not all nations. All right, so let's finish this video off.
Well, there's a lot throughout the New Testament about all of this because, of course, it was written by Jews, originally for Jews, but there's a lot about this. But the takeaway from my perspective, and I think any person who reads it has trouble reaching any other conclusion, but the point of this is Jesus, and getting to heaven requires faith in Jesus. That is Christianity as far as I knew. And so they've changed the definition of Christianity, which seems like, again, I'm not a theologian. I want to say that again. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like they've changed the definition of the religion itself. Like everyone has to believe in Jesus to get to God except for these people. Okay, who are these people? Well, it's this group. It's this chosen group. Well, how do we know who's in it?
Yeah.
Is it an ethnic group? Well, we have Ancestry.com and 23andMe. We can test for that.
Yeah.
Like what percentage of DNA do you need to have to be in this group? Any question like...
Yeah. So like I said, he's playing games because he knows that, they don't allow those so-called DNA tests because that would fully expose them. And like the other Edomite said earlier, hey, this is what also came out of Jerusalem too, right? Just to add on to that point. This... All right, scripture said that their own tongues shall fall upon themselves, man. No such thing as a white European Ashkenazi J, right? Ashkenazi J's are not white. Response to Harass article, I would like to say it loud and clear. Ashkenazi J's are not white. All right, people of color, we've done plenty of lessons proving this. All right, so it's a wrap.
Like that, just a rational question is met with like an attack. Ted Cruz, like 3 questions in, called me an anti-Semite. And to my shame, it made me mad. I shouldn't have gotten mad. I should have laughed. But I did get mad. I was offended. I don't know if
Your car insurance company...
Bear with me. Let's let this pass.
Before. In the months since, I would call it like 100 times a day. But at the time, I was like, anti-Semite? Of course I'm not anti-Semite, which I'm not, and wasn't then. But I was struck by his, like it's a tell for me as someone who interviews for a living. If I ask you a question and rather than answer it, you attack me, you kind of answered it in a sense, didn't you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You didn't actually answer the question.
Right.
You, in order to avoid answering the question, you attacked me. So, no, and I think, by the way, I think it's just mostly dying. Like I don't meet too many people who will defend the proposition that, we as Christians believe that you need to believe in Jesus to get to heaven, except for some people who may or may not have anything to do with each other or the ancient Israelites don't have to believe in Jesus because how? None of it makes any sense at all. And so my view is, and this is not hate, this is love. I think everyone needs Jesus. I certainly do. Much more than I have, by the way.
Likewise. Do you believe Christianity is going to become a minority in America?
Yeah, it already is.
And who do you think is going to be who's going to be responsible for that? You know, some people are going to say, oh, you know, the Muslims, which I'm very passionate about Islam. It's something I've been very passionate about recently. You know, some people are going to be like, oh, it's the Muslims. Some people are going to be like, oh, it's this. Who do you think is going to be responsible for the decrease in Christianity? Do you think it's going to be
the people who are the
self-righteousness?
real threat? And the real threat are not religious people. Don't have anything. Orthodox Jews have a completely different religion from mine. You know, they're reading the Talmud all day. I'm not even sure what's in there. I'm not against Orthodox Jews. I've always gotten along with them.
Yeah.
I'm not against Orthodox Muslims at all. Always gotten along with them. I don't think the threat to me, from my perspective, they're not the ones running OnlyFans. They're not the ones selling meth. They're not the ones destroying my country. They're also not the ones shooting people, by and large. They are being watched by the God they believe in. Now, it's not my God in a lot of cases, but I feel like the threat is people who think they're God, clearly. I don't really know any. You think Ilhan Omar is like a faithful Muslim? No, she's a white liberal, actually. That is the category that really worries me. Those are the most extreme, crazy, the people without God are really terrifying. It's secular people. They're the ones who committed the biggest genocides in world history. It wasn't religious fanatics who murdered all those Christians in the Soviet Union. It was atheists. Mao was not a religious person. He was an atheist. Hitler was some kind of Wiccan or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I'm worried about. And the world that I've lived in, I mean, I grew up in the opposite world from you. I mean, we didn't, I don't think I met too many Baptists in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never heard the word Jesus uttered in public except when you hit your thumb with a hammer or something.
Yeah.
And I think those people are really scary.
Yeah.
People without any God.
There you go, man. So I pray this lesson was edifying, and shalom to the next one. Shalom.